founded a company called Outthinker Networks. And if to link it to our conversation here, it's sort of, you could say what we've done is we've built and we're building a knowledge ecosystem of practitioners. And what that really is, we are a professional member organization that serves two people: heads of strategy of large multi-billion-dollar businesses and entrepreneurs working inside large multi-dollar businesses.
Okay, thank you very much for the intro, Kaihan. So just quick word where I am today, because I'm not in my usual spot, not in my usual city, not in my usual country. I'm a little bit far away. I'm in Nairobi, Kenya this week. I'm actually sitting at the government of the Transport Authority, at the head of the office of the head of the department that's gently, let's say, lend me his office to do the podcast. We actually had a lot of discussion about the topic we're going to discuss right now with Kaihan. So, Kaihan, one question I always ask my guests, because I like to have different angles. What is your definition of innovation?
I've looked at lots of definitions of innovation. I think you mash them up together. It's really three things that people generally would say. First, it's got to be surprising. So someone has to look at it and say, wow, that's different, but that's not a quantitative measure. That's a qualitative measure, so that's beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But there's that. The second, it has to be adopted. You could have a beautiful thing that doesn't sell, that no one uses. Steve Jobs said, innovation is creativity that ships. It has got to sell. And third, it's got to be valuable. It's got to create value, not necessarily for the innovator necessarily, but it's got to create value for the ecosystem or society. So those would be my three requirements of something to be in innovation. So, when we talk about the pace of disruption, what I think is interesting, if we look at what determines the pace of innovation, the critical path is not the technology. The critical path is understanding what to do with the technology. And in my talks, I mentioned the case of in 1968 when a gentleman named Dick Fosbury was in the Olympics competing in the high bar competition, and he was the first person in an Olympic competition, at least, to go over backward. And he wins the Olympics. It takes the competition 8 years to copy him. 8 years later, 90% of high jumpers are doing what's now called the Fosbury flop. And it's one of many, many examples that show that the language of how to use the innovation follows the technology. The technology that allows you to go over the high bar forward, which are simply pads put on the other side of high bars, we were laying those down already 15 years before, right? So it's not until we come up with the term Fosbury flop that we can start collaborating, maybe creating an ecosystem, if we would say, around that technology, right? You can't call a coach and say, hey, can you teach me the Fosbury flop? You can't get a book on the Fosbury flop. So I think what's important for us to look at the language as a trail to the technology. How long was Salesforce.com saying no software, not software, and the market kind of thought, couldn't get their heads around it. What is this? And then the term, the cloud, which is a very helpful metaphor for describing the technology because it has entailments, associations with a cloud that allow people to make sense of what we're doing. The fact that I'm not downloading software on my computer, but it's on your hard drive, on your server, and I'm accessing it through this thing. I don't know what to call it, but the word cloud, I can visualize now. Oh, my information is up in the cloud. It's not actually up in the cloud, but it is that introduction of the language that determines the pace of disruption. So if we want to get ahead of the pace of disruption, we want to shorten that lag between the technology can do something and I built the language around the technology to be able to take action. Yeah, AI comes up often in our strategy network. There's, in fact, we were just in Atlanta 2 weeks ago and dedicated half a day. We had the head of strategy for HP Enterprises, the head of strategy for another big software company, engage with strategists of all kind of different industries. And AI, cuts across the board. I would say just a few things that came out of that might be new, because most people here probably have been paying attention to and looking at what people are doing with this kind of thing. But I'd say like one of the big takeaways was this has moved so fast that you can be an expert right now, and then 2 weeks later, you're no longer an expert. So it's not about sitting down and learning the technology. In fact, the AI technology kind of part of the promise is we don't have to understand the technology anymore, right? I don't have to know how to code. I can just talk. So the point is like, this is, if you want to keep pace of this or explain what's going on, it's less about creating certainties. Oh, this is how we use it. It's more about keeping track of what the latest, what the latest trends are. If we look at who's going to make value from the, from adoption of AI, if you look, one of the strategists was simulating that to comparing that to the adoption of mobile during Web 2.0. So when companies went from, or could go from a website to a mobile device, some companies failed and couldn't keep up. Some existing companies, they saw it and they seized it. So think about Facebook, for example, or think about Amazon. They embraced mobile. Others like them that didn't, they fell. And then there were some brand new things, mobile first companies that were created. Airbnb and Uber, for example, are examples of companies that will be built on mobile and built because of mobile, especially Uber. You're not going to, the Uber process doesn't work if you don't have adoption of mobile. So anyway, we'll probably see the same kind of thing. There'll be some companies that are there today that will fall behind, either because they're too slow to adapt or because this disrupts their business model. I think, like, for example, if you are in the business of I don't know, running back offices for law firms, you can imagine a lot of that's going to be automated. Some are going to leap on it, and AI has the potential to reduce the cost basis for a lot of things in your company by 30 to 40%. Software, whatever you spend on software with AI, we can expect in the near term a 30 to 40% improvement on that. So companies that have a big chunk of their expenses spent on technology development, we're going to see, maybe they have a 5% margin, and they could now move from a 5% margin to a 25% margin because so much of their cost is now turned to AI. And for those kinds of companies, it's going to be huge. And then we'll have whole brand new companies that are AI first, built on AI. And it's hard to imagine what those would be. Well, what I'm hearing from strategists is the big question is that is the big question, because they have data, that's proprietary data that they could use to train an AI. But if they train the AI, then that data can get incorporated either as data that's now available, or the learning from that data can get incorporated into the AI. And then a competitor could use the same AI and then basically benefit from their knowledge, right? So the question of whether to share it or not, but luckily, this is probably, this was new to me, that there's a foundational AI, and then there is so the foundational AI can be open. You can buy that, and then you can train it or tune it, as they call it, with your data. Like my wife right now is working in a media company that has a certain very specific media company. They have more information than anyone about this particular type of person. And that's the debate that they're having. Should they use it to train an AI?
We focus a lot here in PosterLab on the circular economy. I know within the last month, we had a lot of connections with the Africa Climate Summits, and Sébastien's currently in Nairobi with CSTI and Cecilia. So I'm wondering, just in general, maybe a few examples of maybe some of the people you work with in your ecosystems on, what are kind of some developments on circular economy, whether they're direct or indirect.
Yeah. There are two research projects that our members have asked us to investigate next year. One of them is this is part of one of them, which is what they're calling is like the impact economy. That it used to be that doing the right thing out in the world, it was a good thing morally to do, and it had some benefit in that it might, improve people's, appreciation of your brand or whatever, right? But now a lot of these things that were externalities are becoming internalities. right? It was before, insurance is going to be hurt because they're going to have to pay these things out. So they're going to incorporate it in, and we're going to start seeing our insurance costs increase. But what I think this year is kind of broadly waking people up to, hey, it's not just that my insurance is going to increase, my electricity bill is going to increase because our systems are going to have to be, re-engineered. Our travel is going to start increasing because of the pollution of traveling, and people are going to want to travel less. But we're starting to see the pain all across the board. We're going to see housing prices rise, which means that our salaries are going to have to rise. So my point is, whereas before it was we had a business and there was this nice thing we could do on the side to do the right thing for either moral or branding purposes. Now a lot of that cost that was being bared outside of us is now starting to be bared inside of it. And what that does, it moves the circular economy away from the sustainability manager that's 3 buildings down to the boardroom. This is going to hit our line item number 52. And if that goes up, our margin goes down, and then investors are going to disinvest, and our stock price is going to go down, and I'm going to get fired. So that what I think is this. I think there's an exciting moment where people are broadly realizing that a circular economy isn't just a nice thing to have. It's now becoming business. Even people who all they care about is profit, and they don't care about society, right? They maximize shareholder value. That is now that is in their equation. It's not been in their equation before.
Considering the environmental, the circular, and also the social impact with AI and other things in general, and how that is changing compared to years ago, where do you see it going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, AI is going to take a lot of energy. It's going to create a lot of heat. It's not by itself, the activity is not salutary to the environment. When we had this conversation, the last one with our chief strategy officers, I was really surprised that one conclusion that it landed to when we talked about organization of people and labor is the idea that in the United States, we will need, I forget what it's called, the guaranteed income, right? We have a very low threshold you have to fall pretty far before, but so many people are not going to have skills or training that allows them to do something better than an AI does now. And, we're going to relearn but it's going to be a significant social problem. So I was surprised that was sort of the conclusion, because the business community is not in the United States so kind of warm to the idea of a universal basic income. But again, to my first point, now the social cost of that is going to feed back in.
Yeah. That's to us, and I think to you too, that's the benefit of the strategy networks and of ecosystems.
Yeah. Yes.
The importance of growing in partnerships and being able to work together on these critical problems. So critical.
Yeah. Like when your ecosystem, when your partner community, it's sort of like the more interconnections we have with each other, the more common purpose we have, right?
Yeah. If I may jump in into the discussion, you hear me, guys?
Yep.
In the following days, I'm here in Kenya because there is an ecosystem being built. So what it means is that there is a strategy from the government of Kenya to come up with new technology to reduce emission footprint in the construction sector. And the association that I'm supporting is CSTI, and CSTI is actually what I define as an ecosystem orchestrator. So they are talking with all the stakeholders in the environment and trying to see, let's say, what kind of mandate, vision, and capabilities of these stakeholders have. Bottom line being to do a mapping of the ecosystem of the stakeholders. And we are actually by the government to actually explain our vision and to see how it's fitting the government's 5 years plan that they are working on right now. And this approach is kind of new. And I've been talking with a lot of people with this approach, but I actually see right now here how this approach can be implemented from a very practical standpoint. of trying to align all the stakeholders and trying to pool resources all together. So to give you a concrete example of pooling resources is you have a lot of stakeholders here. You have a lot of equipment, about testing equipment, about in any way or form. And we are also trying to map out this equipment that can be used by different stakeholders among the ecosystem. We are also thinking about coming up with as one to apply for global funding or global grants to be much more powerful. So this ecosystem ID, which I see really right now how it can be implemented. Before that was something for me. There was things that I was trying to relate. But now I can relate, and I see the strengths when you have somebody that people call an orchestrator that can actually pave the way and ensure there is a synchronization towards the same goal with concrete, let's say, deliverable. Or to make it work. Just wanted to bring this to the discussion.
Yeah, that was going to be my question for you. Is an orchestrator? It sounds like the Kenyan government or the division of the Kenyan government is the orchestrator.
Yeah, so they are the one pushing, and you have CSTI, which is an association and NGO that is actually talking to all the players and kind of reporting to the government. Okay, these are the different things in order to ensure that this ecosystem is paving in, let's say, what the government wants to approach. So it's a top-down, bottom-up approach.
Yep.
That is being discussed as we talk right now with the different stakeholders. And I think there's a lot of lesson learned that hopefully I will be able to share along the way with our audience about what is being done here.
How do you think about, it sounds like the ecosystem is around a social promise. How do you communicate that to stakeholders that have different motivations and in a way that they want to participate?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the points we've been discussing, and one of the points we've been raising today is how to communicate to the different stakeholders and also to the citizen that may not have, let's say, all the technical discussion, or maybe we need to find. It was a discussion, and we need to also find ways. When you talk about ecosystem orchestration, is something that may speak to us, but maybe it's too much of hashtags or this thing. So we need to also find ways to articulate this vision and this mission towards a larger group of audience, so that they can also jump on board. To have even more people in. And in the discussion I have had also recently, back to your point, there is a lot of people that are talking about, okay, this is our stakeholder engagement plan. This is how we outreach. So there is very practical things that are being done on that field as well in terms of communication to the different stakeholders.
The one thing that just comes to mind in one of our last sessions with our strategy officers, we had a professor from Emory University, Ozgajan Kashek, and she's fascinating work on culture. But there's a framework that I think could be helpful here, and for anyone building an ecosystem, is when we think about culture, we usually think about values. And if people disagree, it might be that they disagree on values. Oh, it's not important for us to reduce carbon emissions. What's more important is for us to create jobs, for example. That'd be conflicting values. She said, but however, it's very hard to get people to change their values. It takes a long time, if it's possible at all. But sometimes when you see that disagreement, it might be their idea of causality and meaning. So meaning would be when I say carbon emissions, my calculation is this. When you say carbon emissions is this, so we disagree on what carbon emissions is. And the second thing, the middle one would be causality. I don't believe that doing these things is going to reduce carbon emissions. I do believe it's going to reduce. So as you messaging to stakeholders, this kind of the aha for me and a lot of our members was, yeah, we shouldn't just be talking about values. We should be also checking for, do people believe the same causality and they have the same meaning of the language.
Yeah, and what I'm very surprised back on I was involved in some kind of similar project. I'm very impressed by the alignment of the stakeholders on this topic from a strategic and a very operational perspective. So I see there's things that are very much aligned. So for me, it's going to smooth out this whole ecosystem. Related to KPIs, this morning I was attending a discussion about the aviation industry that is, kind of pushing the SAF, so the Sustainable sustainable aviation fuel, if I'm not mistaken. And so they were actually showing what are the latest regulation on the topic and showing it to the Kenyan different stakeholders. And I see that what is being done is different topic, but what is being done on the SAF at European and global level is also very interesting from an ecosystem perspective. Because you have big goals, big vision that are accompanied by a very good structure and very specific KPIs. And what is quite interesting is that this stuff is very recent, and you would have some business case like Airbus, like EasyJet, that already started to report last year, even though the regulations came in place like 3 or 4 years ago. So they're already fulfilling compliances. I mean, fulfilling claim on the amount of SAF they use in their flights. So what is also interesting for me is that you have, so back to your point, I think one of the reasons is that people are seeing the problem at their door now, whereas before it was at the other country or the city. So I think you have an acceleration of action being done towards emission reduction faster than used to be in the past. When I look at SAF, when I look at being here, back to your point, Kaihan.
Yep, exactly. They're related points. How do you think about the sharing? Because there's sort of, they can coordinate together. They're valuable together. You know that together they're worth more. But how do you guys think about the? Because two partners come together, they create a 3 value. How do we split that?
Yeah. So the thing is that when we are talking about this ecosystem mapping, each party are aligned towards the same goal, but each parties have also
I think we've lost them.
I think so, perhaps.
Well, I'll continue that.
Okay, I'm back here.
Back.
Back.
So yesterday we were at the organization that is managing the Kenyan standard, and so what is clear is that everyone in the stakeholder has his core business, his core value proposition, or his core services. And what is interesting is it's clear for everyone what is everyone core. And so the overall picture is that there is alignment, but there is every one of the parties says, okay, at the same time we are doing towards the same goal, we need also to satisfy our own mandate, our own aspiration. And all of this is feeding into this kind of what I summarize as a consortium approach. Same goal, but everybody has his own mission to make it work. So it's kind of is building up on each other.
Yep. Got it.
Back to your point.
Got it. But is the value sharing, is that centralized or decentralized? So for example, are partners coming up with their commercial arrangements one-on-one, or are you saying we're going to come all together and we're going to pool our value and somehow share it? Or are we saying you guys are each going to, by participating, you're going to capture your value independently?
Everyone is going to capture the value. That's how it works.
Okay.
So there's some
their business model.
So there's a lot of topic about equipment. So testing equipment or equipment to verify the compliance of some goods and materials towards the standards. So that's something specific. And this is building. Everybody is finding values for his own business. By the way the ecosystem strategy is laid out.
Yep, got it.
So, and aside of this, you have also some discussion about going after global grants as a sum. So not as an individual organization, but say, we are an ecosystem, and the ecosystem, which is going to be represented by CSTI, is going to have bigger grants. That's also a kind of a benefit of this ecosystem approach.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and part of being good at it, it's important to be a good partner, a valuable partner if you're operating an ecosystem. And in a way, now by creating this ecosystem, that becomes a more valuable partner to the global ecosystem of brands, because they can deal with one and a coordinated group rather than lots of individual ones.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one of the guests we have in our podcast I said something that I found very interesting. Back in the day, you would come as one company, and you would potentially hide the other people in the supply chain. And they said these days are gone. Right now, it's like you are coming as a team, and all companies are in front of you because it's much more complex than it used to be. I was thinking, but there's a typical idea of a supply chain is OEM, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5.
Yep.
That are behind each other. Okay. The OEM only sees the tier 1. The tier 1 only sees the tier 2, the tier 2, the tier 3, and so on.
Yep.
And whereas when you think about an ecosystem, you have a group of companies that are coming at once together. So it's not something that is, you're not behind each other, you are next to each other. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I like this. For me, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that mental model is so important because that shapes how people think about operating. And we've been trained for so long since Michael Porter introduced it in 1980, the linear supply chain. And people think it's just an easy flip, but it's not that easy to flip your mindset in that way.
Yeah. It's not that easy, but I think this is the right way to go.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But it's changing. It's a paradigm shift. I mean, like I said before, it
is right.
Paradigm shift.
Exactly. The paradigm shifts take time. Going back to what I was saying at the very beginning, it's often the language that slows down the pace of innovation, the language around ecosystem, around supply chain, just like, you guys talk about thinking of new product development. In that word, you've got product. So now you're defining innovation only as product.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. But it's changing. Things are changing. I mean, I think we are already way ahead of time, technical issue and so on. So we don't want to take more of your time, Kaihan. I'm just going to say, so thank you for the audience. Thank you, Kaihan, for making up your time. Stay tuned for the next session. We have this on a weekly basis. The goal is, as we said today and as we explained today, is to share knowledge. That's to make knowledge accessible faster to anyone talking about this, because this is complex and people, as there's education and knowledge sharing that is key in this area. That's our goal with this podcast. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and see you next week for another podcast. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Kaihan.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.